a prayer by Councilman Greenhurst.
Please join me in the Pledge of Allegiance.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Our Father in heaven, thank you so much for all of that for us. Thank you for this wonderful day and for the opportunity we have to be gathered together as citizens of this wonderful town. Father, we are so grateful for the moist words thou wilt bless us with, and we pray that thou will continue to do so. We ask that as we discuss the needs and concerns of the city, that we will be open-minded, that we'll be able to understand and make decisions that are best for the whole. We're grateful for all thou hast blessed us with, and we ask and we pray that those things will continue to do so in the name of thy Son, Jesus Christ.
Amen. Thank you. Council members, have you seen the agenda? If you have, and you're looking for a motion to approve,
So moved, Mayor.
Second.
you have motion second, all in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries. All right, are there any disclosure or declarations of conflict from the city council members or myself here for the matters on? Anyone have any? Out of an abundance of caution, I'm going to disclose that on number F7, Firelight Development, although I've never received any compensation from Firelight Development, there is a sister company that I worked for to help find financing for the bypass road, but I haven't received compensation in a long time, and that was related to the bypass road solar. Anyone else? Okay, let's go on to our next item, consent agenda. The consent agenda, review and possible approval of meeting minutes from March 7 special meeting, May 18th business meeting, and July 6th business meeting. Looking for a motion or changes.
Second.
We have a motion to approve and a second. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries. All right, let's go to our city department reports and begin with Ash Creek Special Services District. Mr. Mike Chandler.
Yeah, I'm happy to report that we've had a busy month. This month, we actually have completed our bonding process for securing funding for our treatment plant. The board approved that in our last meeting last Thursday. That project is moving forward. In addition to that, in advance of that, the board has approved the rate changes recommended to keep our coverage ratio in place in order to pay for some of the improvements we have coming along the road that we see in the next 10 years. So some of our member city staff have been receiving feedback on the rate hikes, which although sometimes starts out as pretty angry, I can report, at least from my staff, maybe after days of being tested, the fact that once we've given an opportunity to explain what we've talked about at these meetings for some time now, and in advance of projects that almost universally people who have taken the time to call and express their disfavor have left satisfied. It's okay, I see the need. I think that nod. So it's been good. And unfortunately, there will always be that kind of retroactive public outreach and try to meet all the state's requirements for public noticing publications. We appreciate those calls. People are engaged and they want to be a part of local government. That's an important part of it. In addition to that, we continue to work with the city's managers on the bypass road. We finished a big change on the manhole materials and things to make sure we got the right things out there and moving forward with that. Continue to work, coordinate, I should say, with the Conservancy District on trying to develop some of the reuse alternatives for this side of the county to diversify our water portfolio and to provide long-term water sustainability. So it's been a busy month and we have a lot still on the plate there.
Tell us about the relocation of the pump station up at Anderson Junction. What's the status on that?
So we've seen some of the materials start to show up on site. In the coming month, you'll see demolition of the old structure. They're moving the pump skids, some of the other things. And as we hold their building, digging, replace the new wet well, reconstruct the floor grade, put the slab, reinstall the pump station. For those who aren't aware, that was the pump, the dam for the reservoir had initially been located about an elevation almost 18 feet lower for the valley. After geotechnical testing, it was moved further up, and then it just so happened that the existing pump station was located within the inundation area of the reservoir. So that pump station was needed to be removed, the service district absorb that cost in advance of the construction of the dam, the reservoir, so that will be moved. With some of the proposed development out near the interchange there, we anticipate that we'll have connections coming on shortly after that pump station is completed.
Okay, thank you. Any questions for Mr. Chandler?
What is the timeline now before that Populous Park plant is completed? Is it a 5-year?
No, so we'll probably take the next 6 to 8 months to decide completion of that. We're anticipating a first quarter bid of 2023. And depending on material scarcity and other things, we expect an 18 to 24 month construction period. We're hoping it'll be online and operational by first quarter of 2025.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you. On to Hurricane Valley Fire District Representative, Mr. Merlin Spendlove.
Yeah, I didn't get read out for call volume, but I know we've been busy. It's been fairly quiet over here. We had a meeting the other day, and we'd probably like to bring in our wildland guys, one of the meetings, probably in the next couple of months, having on the agenda. Just kind of rehash over the litigations that we can do for the town, to help with the match. And, we're still doing a lot of, we were talking about, you mentioned at a meeting about still doing limbs and taking care of the limbs up over at the park. But I'd like to have them come in and just kind of give you, if there's any other projects in the city that we need to get down, like maybe down in Joy Creek or somewhere in there, where there's some heavy debris and stuff in there. Do some cleaning out in there, so we have that option. So we want to take advantage of what they can do for us to help some of the areas of town that might be a little dangerous, try to take away those fire hydrants. I will meet with that and plan a time to have them come in as soon as their wildland try to slow down, because they're most underemployed right now in Idaho. This fall, we'll have to come in and we can work through the winter stuff.
Okay, thank you. Any questions for Mr. Spendlove? All right, Mr. Joe Campbell, Planning Commission Chair. What's the news, Mr. Campbell?
Everything that I got either on the agenda for tonight or in 2 weeks. So nothing really pressing. Planning commission level is not on
Okay, thank you. And after more, City Manager.
Mine's actually pretty simple. Financial report, our spending is on track, always been being for once a month. Almost 17% of the year has gone, and we've spent less than 7% of the budget. So I reviewed that obviously with the mayor, and so we're on track for spending. The road report, Tokerville Parkway is ongoing. We're gonna have an update on that later on the agenda. And then still working on the Anderson Junction water line project. The district is working on securing those water rights and stuff. So we definitely are still moving forward with that, even though it's been a little bit quiet. That is ongoing. So economic growth, Firelight's obviously on the agenda. What's Builders is on the agenda. The general plan and the annexation policy plan is moving forward. The survey went out this week on our website and some other things. We have a postcard getting ready to go out. That survey is going to be open until August 31st. All the final hard copies should be out received by everybody by Saturday. We also have an envelope in them already addressed and stamped to send that back. Quick update on the Westfield Park. We've had let a lot of residents know that we're moving forward, grassing that area, putting in benches, and we're going to kind of phase that out as we can as materials come. So that's kind of an update on that. We're working on grassing that, putting in the benches, and getting out the restrooms, getting the restrooms going. So then business licenses. We currently have 61 active business licenses in Tokerville. We've only issued one so far this fiscal year, so since July 1st. Renewals happen in December, so we'll have an update on renewals happening then. Obviously, there have been some night rentals and lots of conditional use permits. The farmer's market is on 8/20, and then we're gonna have a sod rain party for the Westfield Park, hopefully toward the end of September. We were hoping by Labor Day, but it's looking like with some of the materials and putting in the irrigation is closer to the end of September, but we'll let everybody know we're gonna be putting in those big bales of the drought resistant, grass and things. So anyway, so that should be toward the end of September. Obviously, we try to post the information on our website, social media pages, and that's what I have. That's really it.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah.
Mr. Snow, City Attorney.
Not anything other than what's on the agenda.
All right, and also, Bruce Jenkins, can you hear us, Bruce?
I can, particularly those closest to the mic, and I can hear you very, very well.
All right, do you have anything you want to report to us today?
Only when we go through the Firelight stuff, that's the only thing that I'm focused on.
All right, sounds good. We'll get to that. Unfortunately, that is, well, I shouldn't say unfortunately, but it is the last item on our agenda. So put your computer on mute.
Well, I may, and then just as a thought, maybe on these issues involving Firelight, the agenda is such that we put them closer to the front of the agenda, then I can drop off earlier and save everybody a little bit of time and money.
Okay. All right, we appreciate that. Thank you.
You bet.
Okay, that ends that portion of our agenda. Let's now go to our public hearing portion. We have two items to have a public hearing on, so I'll declare our public hearing open at this time. We'll discuss now first item, item number 1, which is public input is sought on the preliminary plat application submitted by Wasatch Commercial Builders. The current zoning is R115, single family residential. If you have comments or statements you'd like to make, please step up to the microphone and state your name and address, and then if you would limit your time to 3 minutes, please. Anybody want to say anything on this item? Thank you.
I'm Van Kleiman, 7 North Ash Creek Drive. I've sent all of you a letter. I have been to the Planning Commission. It seems like everybody just wants to kind of wash their hands of the problems, the future problems that are going to be created when those homes go in. And the agricultural land that I plan on farming and my kids plan on farming for the foreseeable future. All we're asking for is a 8 to 10 foot block wall be constructed at the developer's expense, which would eliminate a whole lot of problems. Everything that I've heard has said, well, this is really the buyer of that lot. It's responsibility to do their due diligence. Well, that's fine, but they don't have a clue what they're looking for. And all I want to do is avoid future conflicts. If a little kid climbs over the current fence and tries to pet one of our bulls, I don't want to have a problem with that bull taking that kid down. There's also noise. There's also smells. I just think that it would be a wise thing for Wasatch Builders. It'd be a wise thing for this council to require them to put that up in order to get preliminary plat approval. And that's what we're asking for.
Thank you. We appreciate your comments and insights. Anyone else? All right, seeing none, we'll move on to the next item. Oh, sorry, didn't see you.
You don't work very fast, do you? DC Young, 1195 South Westfield Road, across from the Ash Bluff subdivision potential. I've said before at the Planning Commission, and I will say again, I think the city should very strongly look over the idea of making the secondary or the emergency services access road that's planning to be built there into making that the primary road entry into the cemetery. That's the word, into the cemetery, and make the cemetery a nice place that you don't have to. We're going to have a road there anyway. We're going to scar that hill anyway. Let's put a road in there that we're proud of, that we can use as a primary entryway to that cemetery. The other thing that I would say is, we knew that someday that those properties were going to be developed. It looks like they're going to be developed in a fairly nice way. I hope we can accommodate everybody. I hear the problems that we have with Mr. Kleinman. I appreciate those. We've seen some things being chased across those fields as we've watched over the last 15 years. So I just hope that that will happen. The other thing is the city is going to lose a bunch of trees, a whole bunch of trees that are beautiful. They add to our city. I'd like to see some way that we know that we get trees planted as a consequence of taking those trees out. And that should be part of the development. Thank you.
Thank you. Those are great points, both of you. Thank you. Anyone else? Okay, now we'll go on to item number 2. Public input is sought on an ordinance regarding a drug nuisance. It would be entitled for Chapter 1, Sections 1, 2, and 5 of the Tokerville City Code. This was at the request of the Washington County Sheriff's Office that this be added to our code. Anyone want to make any comments on this item? Okay, I see none. So I'll declare our public hearing closed. Thank you for your patience there. Let's move on now to our business portion of our agenda. The first one is a discussion only item regarding the Tokerville Parkway, and Bob Lamoureux is here to provide us an update on how things are progressing.
Mayor, council. For those of you who don't know me, I'm Bob Lamoureux. I'm the resident engineer on the project. Councilman Williams had asked us to give an update to the council about how the project is going. We're about 60% done with the time that was allotted for the project. The major items of work that are going on right now are we're about 85% done with the earthwork. The items that are remaining to be completed with the earthwork are around the concrete structures, the flume wash, the pedestrian tunnel that's at the flume wash is the last portion of that. The concrete structures that is to be finished. They have a pour scheduled for the one wall on Friday, and then they'll pour 2 weeks later. They'll pour the cap on that. So by the end of August, we should be done with all of the concrete structures. Earthwork will be ongoing after that, and it'll probably be the end of September before we finish the remaining earthwork. As you may or may not know, they have a large crushing operation that's going on out there. They're making the granular borrow for the project, and they've made about half what is needed for the project, and they've placed about 2/3 of that half that they've made, and they're ongoing with making the rest of that. They're also making the riprap to line the channels and the pipe inlets, those types of things, and that process is ongoing. That will probably continue through the end of September also, the crushing operation. The other kind of major item of work that's going on right now is the pipe placement, sanitary sewer, storm drain, the water lines, those kind of things. There is roughly 40,000 feet of pipe that need to be placed on the project. And to date, we've placed just over 8,000 feet. So, and we're averaging about 3,000 feet a month in pipe. So their schedule shows them getting done with the pipe the end of November. But based on their current production rates with the 2 crews that they have on site, the crews are doing a great job with the pipe. It's not going as fast as they would like, but the installations are going great. But anyway, based on that amount of pipe per month, it's going to take longer than they think to get that done. So they are in the process of trying to get more crews on site to help, and they've also been negotiating with a subcontractor to help as well. We haven't had any major delays with supply chain issues, which has been good. We have been delayed with the sewer manholes. We had a delay in changing a product and then in getting those delivered. So those deliveries should start happening this week or the first part of next week, and then that sewer line installation will start. So,
Bob, on those manholes, is Ash Creek paying for those directly?
yes. Yep. They're delivering those, they're paying for
Is
those.
there a modification to the contract?
Yes, we're working on the official modification of the contract. We've worked out the details. We just need to get that all handled, so. That's kind of a general update question. Any
So I
questions?
think, for me, what would be projected completion date?
Well, I mean, if everything kind of continues at the rate that we're going at right now, it would be in the spring, sometime in the spring.
Say May, June?
I would say, yeah, in that April, May, June timeframe. Yeah.
Perfect. Those are the questions I had, council.
Weather set you back at all with all the rain that we had?
So we did have a little bit of washout in the flume wash. It probably set them back a couple of days, but not a significant amount. That was good. The rain was good for the compaction of the subgrade and everything. So overall, I think it's a win.
I did a little math on the piping, and it looks like based upon how much pipe you've got to lay and how fast you lay it, it could be about a year.
Yeah. So if that rate doesn't change and we're doing 3,000 feet a month, then yes, you're looking at another 10 months of doing pipe. So their schedule shows them being done at the end of November. So there is somewhere between those two, the year is definitely the outside end of it. And that end of November would be the most optimistic of the dates. So I think we're somewhere in between there.
Gary, it's perfect, and I think that's why they've addressed the need. So like in Shangri-La, that section's pretty easy for them to sub out. There's 5,800 feet
Yeah.
in there that they're thinking about subbing out. In the meeting, I think tomorrow, they're going to talk about another crew coming in.
Yep.
They're aware. Stanley's been doing a good job. Brett and them have been working to kind of bring it to their attention what needs to take place. But really, they're laying, in my assessment, the easiest pipe to lay. They haven't started laying any sewer yet. Some of the sewer's 20 feet deep. There's three sections that are about that deep, then it shallows up to about 6 feet. And then there's a ton of other utilities to go in. So they've got to get this dialed in to close that window.
And there are penalties, financial penalties if they are late.
Yeah, and there's no, I mean, we've been talking about those penalties kind of from the beginning and asking them to continually update the schedule. We ask them every week if they see it changing, like every week it's asked if they need more time. And I think we're doing everything we can to protect the city and to provide a great product for the city when it's completed. So the time frame has been frustrating.
Yeah.
So
What's the holdup on the piping? Just lack of crew or material you're digging in?
It's a little bit of both. There is some difficult material that
Yeah, I know this is Tokerville. We have a lot of black rock.
Right.
So
And then it's just lack of crew.
are they blasting pre-blast or anything, or just hammering everything?
They met today. They had a meeting with all their cronies to come and talk about the possibility of shooting. Where they've already laid so many feet, they have to skip, say 300 feet, so they don't knock the pipe, and then they can start shooting. I think Tim was a proponent of that, but I don't know the outcome of that as of yet.
I know in the Hurricane Valley, every time they do a sewer pipe, they go in and blast everything first and then come in and scoop it out. So that'll speed them up.
They had a big meeting with some guys that's kind of up the chain from the crew that's on the ground today. So
I hope this wasn't a surprise. I mean, I could have told them 2 years ago that you're going to hit Black Rock before the bid. I'm just wondering.
So it's very well documented in our sources.
Yeah, I just was wondering why this is a surprise now that we're going so slow. So I'm just curious.
it's not so much a surprise to us as the group that's here to do that work is not from the area. So their mindset of how it works is not the same as how we know that it
All right.
works.
No, I'm good. I just,
Yeah.
I got there a couple teaspoons. I can't get it dug, but so.
Yep.
All right.
All right, thank you.
You're
We
welcome.
appreciate your input or your update. Let's go to the next item. Again, it's a discussion only item. It's regarding the city council policy and procedure manual. Afton, do you want to kind of
Yeah,
fill us in briefly?
so municipalities statewide are creating the policy and procedure manuals for elected officials. They changed the 7 state codes, so we're updating ours. We have it as kind of like a procedure for business, for meetings and how to run city council, things like that. The main things are we're updating it to 2022 state code. It's adding sections for social media, electronics, ethics, and grammar requests. They kind of define the difference between administrative functions versus elected official functions. It talks about, talks about procurement, which is already in the employees policy and procedure, that we've got to add that section to this still, so this is just discussion. What we've added, as you look through here, what we've added is on pages 1 through 14. We've added this based on state code, utilities of cities and towns, and we also, Provo cities already completed theirs, so as West Oregon, and have to do like extensive review. So pages 1 through 14 that are italicized, those are added. And we obviously have to run this one through Kate's now, turn this off after this. But then you'll see in here some sections that have been done strike through. Those are for sections that are just redundant. They're already in what we've added. So if you see it was strike through, we're trying to obviously take that out. It's just redundant. The one major change on this is from Utah Leagues of Cities and Towns. Like we said, we'll run this part to return to snow because it's kind of, I don't know, I guess there's differences of opinion. The one thing is on a ground request, we verified this with the League of Cities and Towns, and they actually sent us an email back. That one of the changes at the 5th meeting is that any city business conducted on any electronic device, regardless if it is personal or how the payment is made, whether it's paid personally or paid by the city, that is subject to grant. So
What page is that on?
So that's in here under the social media section. That was
Page
added.
9.
Yeah, and so that's one thing we wanted, so we want to get some feedback on that. That obviously has to run through you, but we verified it 3 days ago with the Utah League of Cities and Towns, just to double check. But obviously they're not state, but they're a resource. So anyway, so that's where this is. Yeah, like I said, page 1 through 14 are what we added. Talks about conflict of interest, talks about social media policy, just, kind of those, I mean, you look through it, it's obviously done a little bit, it's just a discussion, and it's just a draft at this point, so.
Okay,
We're
thank you.
looking for feedback, so as we read through it, if you have questions, definitely let us know. We just want to get it dialed in before we send it for review, so.
Wonder, Mayor, if we ought to take an assignment to review this before our next meeting and have a discussion on it, leave it on the agenda for next week, for
I
2
think it's a
weeks,
great
and then
idea.
have a
Yeah.
conversation on it.
Yeah.
So is there anything that was customized, just basically that the city inserted, or is everything just
No, it's
straight
just
code?
straight code, and then just, like I said, use the cities and towns, Provo and West Oregon, it isn't going to be, no, we haven't had it, we didn't come up with anything at the city level specific to us.
I'd like to see, on the last page where you have the organization flow chart,
Okay.
I'd like you to kind of revisit that. So it's kind of got a straight line where I think there's some areas where we
And we're
can.
open whatever feedback, yeah.
I'd be happy to give you some thoughts on that, but, if you're following the straight line, it looks like everybody reports to the assistant city manager, and that's not the case, so.
Yeah, it's just, yeah.
Heath, I have a question for you. Looking at section 4.3, the GRAMA, it says, all elected officials are subject to GRAMA when conducting city business on any electronic device, whether city-owned or personally owned. So what does that mean exactly? In other words, if I use my cell phone for my city email, but it's a separate email account, is my whole cell phone subject to GRAMA or just the email account? This way this reads, it says any electronic device would be subject. You say, well, wait a minute. If I have my personal email, but it's a different email account, then I don't think the whole phone would be subject to it, but I don't know the answer.
Well, and I think most municipalities are going to training on their city councils, suggesting that they only communicate and deal with city business on city email accounts. They only if there's a necessity to have cell phones, that mayor or elected officials have a city cell phone, and that, any calls aren't done. But the gist of the matter is you're going to have to look at the scope of the grandma request. Now, obviously, we would object, and there are provisions within grandma that prohibits someone seeking personal information and those types of things. And obviously, they would not be produced. But if there is discussion, whether it be in text communications or emails, that is on someone's phone, regardless of whether, see, there was an objection about that. There was a challenge pro city mayor and about that whole issue, and it went up to the Supreme Court, and they determined that it was not relevant as to who owned the phone. It was the nature of the business and whether it was subject to law. And so it's not been codified really I think it will be forthcoming maybe by our legislature under the Grandma Act, be modified to say what we've put in here in this form. But I know our Supreme Court said that you can't try to quash or withhold production of things just because the source or the location where the device that it's on is personally owned.
That makes sense. That's a little different than what it is. Yeah, okay. I think I see that. So we'd want to look closely at that and make sure, because yeah, okay. All right, any other questions? All right, let's move on to our next item. Number 3, discussion of possible action on the preliminary plat application submitted by Wasatch Commercial Builders. Planning Commission reviewed and recommended approval with staff comments on a vote of 3-1.
Mayor, if I could real quick, I'd like to bring up something I've been working on a little bit. Hurricane City has a heritage agricultural ordinance. This might do something with Van and Richard over there, that if somebody moves into an ag and gets their property next to it gets rezoned from ag to, residential, and you have your ag land still, then they can't make you stop spraying herbicides or whatever. You got cows and noise and the smell. It's a heritage, ag land. I think Darren's done a little research on that. So
Justin, I've reached out to the Lowe's and I reached out to the Nagley's to talk specifically about that. They are in favor of it as well.
So Darren, what have you come up with?
So really, we gave a rough first draft, which was basically a dual copy of the Hurricane's ordinance. Took it by the planning commission last month. They are expressing the word, they give me comments, questions, things like that. Now, there are some things we talked about a little bit about the ag protection zone. Does the applicant who still owns ag protection or ag property has to take the application?
Right.
Not other people.
Right, yeah, the person who owns the land, so the Kleinmans would have to ask for that.
And so really, there's a lot of, it goes beyond just ag protection, it goes like,
Natural resources.
natural resources, are basically different things such as, eminent domain across, right of ways and utility lines and different things as well.
So let me ask the question, why are we discussing that when we have on a preliminary plat application?
Well, I agree, but I think we need to maybe discuss some of this ag next to an ag, this went from ag to zoning, and then we have ag next to it. So if we pass this preliminary plat, and we have ag next door, like he brought up, somebody can cross the fence, there's cows, there's whatever, just something we want to talk about real quick.
That's just my direct answer your question. We had a citizen bring it up in public hearing, and this was a solution that we've been looking at, talking about, and it may be a solution to the fact of an 8-foot or 10-foot block wall. I think that's why it's perfect for that
I see, okay. So it would be like, if we move,
It may
it would
be
be a
part of the
condition, okay, all right, I understand, okay.
I think regardless of, what happens here with this heritage thing, that we ought to make a condition that the developer put a wall up on lots number 1, 2, and 3, and determine how we can best deal with that roadway that's entering into his ag land as well. My recommendation is that that be one of the conditions that we have the developer can basically pass the cost on to whomever purchases those lots. So I don't think it's gonna be really an out of pocket for them if they just add the cost of the wall to the price of the land. And that will, potentially solve a lot of the problems with respect to any herbicides or sprays or poisons or anything in the wind there. If we go 8 to 10 foot, and the last thing I need to hear about is a kid climbing over a fence that's not tall enough to protect them from the cattle.
Real quick, what's your complaint with the wall, that road? That road doesn't go anywhere. It doesn't mean it's gonna go somewhere, but in 20 years, if Van passes away, maybe 30 years, I'm not sure how long he's gonna hang around. If that land gets developed, there's a road for continuity between one
That's
subdivision.
fine, but what are you gonna do in the meantime?
Just leave it there and put a wall in front of it. Make it a dead end.
That's what I'm
Yeah.
proposing, that
Yeah.
we block that road off too, so nobody can go into that.
Right,
property.
exactly. Just make it,
Yeah, and, I just feel like that would be a solution, and just, if the developer could just add that wall to the cost of the property, that would be the best way to handle it.
So Gary, I would bring up one thing. I don't know if an 8 foot or 10 foot wall is actually permitted in.
yeah,
So
too tall.
nothing taller than
I
6,
think 6 as well.
6 is max.
building code 6.
Josh, if you got anything you
Just
want
food, I mean,
you need to comment on, as the developer, are you,
I don't think it's the mountain we're gonna die on.
right,
There's access to that property from 100 other directions too, so
right.
if it wants to climb over it, it's gonna climb over it.
Well, with the spraying, will 6 foot do the job?
Well,
If you, in your packets, you've got staff recommendations. Basically, we get staff recommendations where, no recommendations from, as you said, staff comments, talking about going into how to develop and with this, because we do have existing roadway that goes into the cemetery. You can see on the preliminary plat, they have, parking there. There needs to be some type of things in development. I think we're not talking to anything that's anywhere near what the fire. This is a traditional subdivision, this is for property lots. And they also have the phases, they've got phasing plans in the back of the development. I don't know, do you like figure that out or what?
but Darren, so if this is just a preliminary plat, so we can approve the preliminary plat with the conditions. Then we can talk about in the development agreement before final plat comes through, you'd have the development agreement in place and address these items and identify them by phase.
And I would have to defer to E there for, because conditions have to be reasonable conditions. I believe, correct?
Yeah, they do.
It can't be strong, because right there, you've got an easement that goes along that has 1.1 million access to it. They're building a wall right on top of that. I don't know what type of issues of accurate service we have there. But this is definitely the things that we could work out in the development agreement with, between the attorneys, between alongside the village attorney and the city attorney, to make sure that things are good. And in public comments you got there, I think we'll get to finish a whole lot of them.
Yeah.
I don't want to really go in depth, kind of Reader's Digest version with that, ag protection zone, is that it does protect the ag people, because people that, and then also put on the final plan, that, it's in the vicinity of the agricultural zone, you will not smell, you will not do that, you will not have to do those. And we could, in a development agreement, if that's where you guys choose to go, is to have each one of those owners of those lots build something wall. It just depends on how you get on with it, and whatever the legal councils get together and figure out that would work.
I have one question. Are the different color, those are the different phases,
Right. Starting from left to right.
left to right?
So Josh, just because you brought that up, what would be your plan for access to the cemetery? Because the first phase doesn't have any roads connecting in there. Are you thinking like pave a little section in, or what's your thought to maintain access in there?
The thought would be that during phase one, we need the existing access. We would, the reason for phasing obviously is the market state issue. in that process, we don't want to go and tear up all 50 lots or 57 lots and just explode to dust. We would leave that agriculture to do as redevelop and develop the first phase. The first phase would develop using the existing access to the cemetery, we wouldn't disturb that at all.
So even though it goes through the corner lot and the next lot, where would,
And that's something that we could either reconfigure and leave out some curbing at the time, or whatever we have to do to make that work temporarily. Or if it's a better option for the city, then we could extend the road, that loop road, we could extend it to the entrance of the cemetery.
well, or just grab it where it crosses right there on the first left, right?
So what we're getting out of this, we can preliminary plat approval, and then we can come with a development agreement, tweak a few things
There's
before.
a few
Before final.
things having to deal with, they're going to be doing some improvements, and obviously they're modifying the current access to the cemetery, and there's issues about parking and how and when that will be done. There's issues about the sequencing of the phasing, and we need to make sure that the phasing is done in a way that our city's engineer wants it to be done, so that we have proper looping and water pressure, looping of water lines and things like that. So I agree, it does not need to be a very extensive development agreement, but I would request that we, just like the staff recommendation, that if there is going to be a vote to approve it or a motion to approve it, it be subject to, the approval being subject to, there be a development agreement worked out between the city and the developer prior to recordation of final plat.
So
Just
by,
for council's knowledge, that development agreement's in process.
if we were to adopt it like you're talking, what entitlements does the developer
Well,
have?
they basically have entitlements to the number of lots, the location, general locations of the roadway, so essentially the density,
Already granted by zoning.
which is, yeah, it's more fixed by a preliminary plat, but yeah, I mean, the density is generally by zoning, but yes, I mean, that's what they're getting by preliminary plat.
The roads could be adjusted and,
Those separations and phases don't really part lines as far as infrastructure. We need to add infrastructure, we need to put in parking, those are things we can do. They're basically just essentially broken out by law. We're allowed for 20 lots in that phase, so that's why it's the 50 lot. There could be additional infrastructure that's added.
so are you seeking preliminary plat only for phase one?
Or it's
Entire project.
preliminary, the whole thing, and we final on
Okay. Does everyone follow that?
So can I get back to the 6-foot wall really do the job?
I mean, there's a
Is
couple
this-
of issues there, but
So will it keep a kid from going over? Probably.
Well-
Was it gonna keep all the smells away? No. Is it gonna stop sprinklers from overspraying when they're not adjusted quite right, or when the wind blows 900 miles an hour out of the north? No. But it would help for sure.
And
That could be in the development agreement also.
That's exactly what it should be.
Yeah, that's where it would,
That's
should
kind
be,
of what
not here today, but yeah.
AC brought up as well, is like, maybe we can talk about how we replace some trees, and then, we have an issue, the city's gonna be asked, some of the gives from the city is we're gonna give up the right of way that we have, the access on into the park, the cemetery. And then on the south end of the cemetery, looking at how that's done, we're gonna end up having to give some ground to get that access tied in. So we have some points there that we can work with them on to finagle.
as long as that density is not hard fast, in other words, what are there, 50 lots, how many lots total?
Well, but the density is hard and fast.
Yeah, it is hard fast.
Preliminary plat, you
Preliminary plat,
Well, so here's the question, that if we approve this, but then after we do some final adjustments, instead of 54 lots, there's 52 lots, does that tie the city's hands by adopting it as is? Or is there flexibility?
So it's not necessarily zoning, it's density is determined by zoning,
Correct.
not necessarily because they could go a lot tighter.
Mhm.
So they came in with a conceptual.
Correct.
They said that we were not going to go with that, and we're going to keep it.
question is if we approve this, are we tying our hands to this number or is there some flexibility within?
If you go smaller than a lot bigger,
Are you,
if you go smaller, bigger, it's just a preliminary plat. One other thing that's come up is if you do the phases, the secondary access has to come in after the 21st lot that turns in. So when you're doing the phase, the blue phase won't work because you need your secondary access.
Well, so it could work. They just have to do the roadway improvement of an all-weather surface
All-weather
all the way
surface.
through.
Yeah. And that needs to be defined in the development agreement, that secondary access.
Question, is phase one the red or the blue? I can't.
red. Blue's 2, green is 3.
And so far, with the exception of the boundary wall, everything has been discussed.
Not wall, we can further discuss, but there's pros and cons of that kind of wall. But certainly some kind of a deterrent, I think is important.
And disclosure.
I think it's important enough where we don't have the ag protection zone. I don't know, I read the draft of what Hurricanes, and there's a fair amount of work and responsibility on the ag owners' side if they want to have that designation. And that may not be ideal for someone like Van and his family. I think we ought to look at doing, if we do believe that there is a possibility of a health safety issue, we can put a requirement. I mean, there needs to be a rational nexus to the condition that we're putting on it. My preference is that we don't leave it to the lot owners. We leave it to the developer so that it is done in a cohesive way and not piecemeal, and it's all done at one time. Obviously, that is a capital outlay on the developer's part. However, as been discussed, it's something that can usually be recouped in the cost paid by the end.
Let me ask you a question. There's a couple people wanting to talk. The public hearing was before, but I'm okay with
You're the
short
chair of the
question.
meeting.
Is that, if that doesn't violate any rule or anything?
No, you're the chair of the meeting. If you want to take some comment.
First.
The suggestion is move the road, the incoming road right next to the property line. Then you can put your sewer line or whatever else that you need in that. And then that gets it at least 50 feet. Then your 6-foot wall is more than sufficient because it's going onto the road. It eliminates everything.
Okay, thank you.
Just two quick questions. The problem with the road going down on the cut side was the thought that DOT would approve it, the access to the road. Does anybody approach DOT to see if they actually would allow it? And the second one is, if we're gonna do this on any time, like contractors coming in to do a subdivision against that, is that gonna be a standard requirement the city's doing? Or are we just doing it on this one contract?
Well, I think there's more than just because of the ag issues. Anytime we have in our ordinance, when it's a multi-phase subdivision, and that's kind of been a pivot where they have pivoted from when they initially came through, we do require a development agreement on a multi-phase subdivision. So there are things that need to be dealt with, and especially when we're talking about abandonment of an existing right-of-way and, you know, them building some other improvements to our, like parking for the cemetery, things like that. Those things, we definitely need a development agreement. I don't know if we're setting a precedent if we address some of the ag issue, you know, the adjacent ag issues in that development agreement too.
One of them, Route 17, the state control of Route 17 switched to the bypass, and that affect that secondary access.
So that's a great question, DC, and there is no guarantees on when the state will take that. They will not take it until the Parkway is connected from north to south, and I would guess that they would have, there's no time frame associated with it, but I think they want to do it fairly quickly. So probably within 18 months of it connecting, I think that they would have time to go to the board and get approval to move forward.
That may affect when you use secondary access.
I think it's strategic that they're laying it out in the phases that they are.
Okay, so we've had discussion. Any other discussion, or are we ready to go forward with the vote?
Mayor, I'd like to motion that we approve item F3 with staff comments.
Motion, is there a second? A motion and a second. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? All right, motion carries unanimously. I didn't hear your vote.
I'm still thinking.
All right, so let's wait until,
It really doesn't matter at this point, so I'll go with an aye as well.
so motion carries unanimously.
Yes.
Okay. All right, thank you.
So I, just to make sure that we're clear, that means developer, you need to work with staff to get a development agreement finalized and in place, approved by the council and back before we can record the final plan. That's
Let's go to item number 4, discussion of possible action on an ordinance regarding the drug nuisance for Title 4, Chapter 1, Sections 1, 2, and 5 of the Tokerville City Code.
Mayor, I'd like to make a motion that we approve drug ordinance, nuisance ordinance.
Right, we have a motion. Is there a second?
I second it.
I think there's a typo.
Typo?
Yeah.
Which one and where?
Fix the typo. Well, I'll rephrase my motion to fix the typo and then approve item.
And do you agree with that in your second?
I second
Well-
it, yeah, well, unless Gary's got some more. Did you find more?
Let me pull it up.
I did read it.
And,
I typos all
day.
I never see typos.
What I want to know is it in the red or is it in our existing ordinance?
It's in the red. It says excluding calls for drug or party houses. And I think it should say including calls for drug or party houses.
It is.
Excluding, including, that's not much of a change there, Gary.
No, mine is-
That's what we have, Gary.
That is in item 4D.
Yeah, 4D,
You want to
change
change
from
that?
excluding to.
Yes, I would like to modify my motion to include the changing of excluding to including in 4D.
Oh, that would have been a great news.
Yeah.
All right, motion and a second. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? All right, motion carries. Go to item F5. Discussion of possible action on the Verkada camera system. Afton, do you want to fill us in briefly?
I do, so there's a quote for next Stacy, if you want to pull it up. This one, so we purchased the last round of ARPA funds, we actually purchased cameras for the city. It was not the right camera system, and that was actually purchased one of the recommended, it was done, this is one that actually, is met for municipalities, for areas, for growth. That's obviously the total you can see there, the problem ones that we have is they do not work. And so
So
we
Afton,
have like 8 cameras at
is
one.
it these one, like these cameras, or are these like out throughout the?
This is
Okay.
Trail Ridge, Center
Perfect,
Street.
okay.
So for example, we have 8 cameras at Center Street. We have 2 that kind of work and they can't be. So we had people vandalize the restrooms at Trail Ridge. We have no idea who did it because we can't see down in there. So the idea, we received our round of ARPA funding for this year, which is American Rescue Plan funds, COVID funds is what people call them. It was $102,000. There are 4 approved uses for that. One of them is IT. The rest involves water. So it involves, so you can do anything IT or security based or computers, things like that, security. Or you can do, the water is obviously stormwater, wastewater, culinary water, those pieces. So the proposal, what we're hoping is that we can spend this out of that ARPA funding, so it doesn't come from tax dollars or anything else. It would come from the ARPA funding, but obviously protect the parks in the city. And then we would ask that the rest of that funding be moved to water so that they can do a water project, whether that's Anderson Junction or something like that. But that's what the proposal is asking. This round of ARPA funds would go toward, that this would be the requirement for electronics, IT, but the rest of it we'd like to move toward water to do some sort of city project, something like that. So that's what we're
So
asking.
You're not asking for that, for the second half to be part of your motion, right? Until we have a
No,
project.
we're just saying that would
Right.
anticipate, is that this is the, last year for the ARPA funds, we spent like, computers, we did that, we did software upgrades, we got our server out of that, and we did do public works things, we got the generator for the springs, we bought the trailers that are at the end of the flashing signs at the end of that. So we did road projects, things like that with it. This time around, the funding is specific for either IT or water. So we're just saying this, and then the rest of it just, we put water, yeah.
All right, I'm looking for a motion.
Mayor, I'd move that we would expend it, that we approve the expenditure of $27,680.48. So why don't we make it $28,000 for the cameras in those locations?
Will you designate the source of the funds?
So it's coming from the use, it's ARPA funds.
We have a motion, is there a second?
Second.
All right, this is expenditure funds. I need a roll call. Begin over here, Councilman Williams.
Aye.
Aye.
Motion carries unanimously. All right, let's go to our next item, F6. Discussion possible action on a resolution regarding the natural hazard mitigation plan.
So this one, maybe we want to pull it up, just including an email. So this one is pretty simple, part of the natural hazard mitigation plan with Five County, we put it in there. You want to pull up that email. This is a resolution that's, Jared Gates. This has been reviewed by our floodplain administrator, Jared Gates. Hold on, it's on that in SharePoint, but anyway, and then Jared responded to that, said he doesn't have a problem with this. This allows us to apply for funding to do things associated with natural hazard mitigation, cleaning out ash tree, removing debris, all sorts of things, but it's for rock falls, landslides, earthquakes, it's to mitigate any of those natural hazards. If we're going to apply for funding, we need to adopt this resolution. It's pretty simple. Can you blow that up so that people can see that maybe?
Do we have a copy of the 2022 natural hazard mitigation plan? The plan itself, at least as it relates to Tokerville City?
It's in the, yeah, we do.
Oh, I see the email and I see the resolution.
It's the same as the one you've been in before, it just
Okay.
identifies, saying we want to continue this.
Just wanna make
It's
sure.
past the public comment period. It's been reviewed, but Jared Bates prepared it, the administrator prepared it. So, but I'll send it to you too, she can upload that, and that's fine.
For the council, if they feel comfortable. Floodplain administrator has reviewed the plan, was involved in its preparation, feels comfortable with the plan itself. We're adopting a resolution that accepts and adopts and applies it to us here within our city. I don't know if the council would like to look at the actual plan itself or not. If they're fine and trust staff and their input on it, then we can go ahead and move forward.
I'm looking for a motion to either table or go forward with the adopt.
Well, I would rather review it.
Yep.
And
I'd make motion to table this item, Mayor.
Yeah, we got it in 2 weeks.
a motion to table, we have a second? We have a motion and a second by Councilman Williams. All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? All right, motion carries. Let's go down now to item number F7, discussion possible action on Firelight development agreement. Mr. Snow, do you want to, you weren't here during our disclosure of conflict. You want to disclose your conflict for us and then
As I'm attempting to do at each meeting, whenever there is a Firelight item on, I will disclose to members of the meeting that I do have a conflict of interest. I represent Firelight Development, Inc., and the subsidiaries of that entity. And as such, the city has retained conflict counsel that represents them on and advises them on all things with regards to Firelight. That's Bruce Jenkins, who is present. So I think just so that we avoid confusion, I'd rather sit down there, and I'll let them.
I think that's probably a better practice, just so that it's clear for everyone. All right, so Bruce, are you online with us?
You have him mute.
Unmute, mute. Bruce, are you there? Let's wait till it gets back online so that we can have him fill us in on what's happening. Whatever.
I think the host muted.
Okay,
There we go. Okay, we can hear you now, Bruce. All right, if you would, fill us in on what has happened. I did forward your email to the council members, but if you would, fill us in on what's happened since our last meeting and the list of conditions that were prepared. Is he talking? Can you hear us?
Hello?
Can you hear us? He didn't hear us. I don't.
hey Bruce.
Hello?
We're trying. Can you hear us? He doesn't see us, right?
Bruce, can you hear us?
Can you guys hear me now?
Yeah, we can hear you. Can you hear us?
Yes, I can.
Okay.
Thanks.
Okay, Bruce, can you hear us okay? Maybe not.
Okay, we might have to go. All right.
Can you hear us, Bruce?
Yes, I can.
All right, so we're having some kind of a connection issue, but we'll just go forward. If you would, it's now the agenda item for Firelight Development Agreement. If you would inform the council here what has happened since our last meeting and how it culminated in the list of conditions, and then give us your recommendations.
Okay, can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay, good. So, at the last meeting with the council, there was an application before the council for final plat and other things, and the application was deemed incomplete, so things were tabled, action wasn't taken. With respect to the development agreement, the planning commission had made a recommendation to the council to adopt the development agreement, subject to a condition, as best I recall that condition, and I don't have it in front of me, it was something to the effect that the uses sought for the various development areas will still have to go through the same processes for review and approval of those uses. That's my recollection. But Joey or someone could correct me if that's mistaken. In between then, and actually just prior to the council meeting before, Keith Snow, on behalf of Firelight, as Firelight's council, had sent out the city just hours, I think, before that council meeting, a new iteration of the development agreement. So the council had looked at the previous version, hadn't had time to look at the new version, and again, the issue was just tabled. Since that time, it's my understanding, based upon the communication with Keith, that Scott McCall, one of the Firelight representatives, has tried to assist by visiting various council members to find out their concerns with the development agreement, if any, and compile a list of conditions that still need some resolution to the development agreement. Those list of conditions are, I believe, attached to the agenda or provided to the packet that the council has. And so in sum, what I think Firelight is asking is that the development agreement be approved, subject to resolution of these list of conditions. I've been in contact with Afton and Heath a little bit further about some of those conditions. And there's probably a couple of conditions that I would, after reviewing this, also want the council to consider. And the council might have other issues that they've looked at and said, oh, this is an issue, condition I want resolved. So I don't have a problem overall with approving the development agreement, subject to these conditions being wordsmithed and resolved to the satisfaction of council. I think we're fairly close on a development agreement, but as I said, there's a couple of conditions that I would like to discuss in addition to those advanced by Firelight, and I can do that now, or if you want, I could hear from the council first and then discuss those conditions. What would be the preference, Mayor?
My preference would be to have you review those conditions with us, and then if the city council members have anything else they want to add, that we can then discuss those, but that way we're not redundant.
Mayor, I have a couple that I would maybe like to go over before, because I think what will happen is, as he goes through those conditions, that may give us the ability to make a motion. So instead of having to do that and ask some more questions and then try to reiterate what he gave us as those conditions, it may be easier to clear those up now.
So you want to go over the ones you have first?
I just have a couple actually simple ones, I think.
I'm comfortable with that.
Are you all right
Go
with
ahead,
that?
yep. So Bruce, we're going to change it just a little bit here.
Okay.
So Bruce, this is Councilman Bringhurst. In going through these, there's been a great deal of work that's cleared up really all of my concerns. One of the items that I brought up to Scott, and I just need to have clarification from you, is in the document, we refer to a subject property, and it identifies a subject property as 193 acres. And I just want to make sure that this is designed and it allows for that all the ground that's purchased as when all the property was acquired, that's when, because it talked about the Westbrook agreement terminating upon being acquired. So
It terminates incrementally as segments are purchased.
So it's going to go with each piece of the ground.
So if you would think about, some of you might be familiar.
Heath, can
Yes.
I say something that might help?
Yes.
Okay. Councilman Brinkham, with respect to the Westbrook agreement, from the scope of the loan documents. Well, what Keith is talking about is kind of like the development lease program. As the property is taken down by Firelight, it's released from the Westbrook agreement. And so if there's any property not taken down, it would still be subject to the Westbrook agreement. If all the property is taken down, then the Westbrook agreement would be moved, satisfied, terminated. Does that help?
That's fine. I'm a pretty simple person. All I really want to make sure is they buy property. I felt like this document continually referred to the subject property and that it applied to the subject property. I want to make sure there's a mechanism that whatever grounds acquired becomes subject property, and this is held throughout the whole project. And I didn't feel like that was clear. That's why I brought it up.
And I
But when I went through it previously, I felt like that was clear, but I'm going to make a note that the subject property and after acquired property issues maybe clarification.
Yep, and I can point you to the area that I thought was going to cover it, but I needed counsel on it, and that was in section 4. Let's see, it would be in 14A4, and it says not within the subject property or the after acquired property that parties shall work together. So I think the intention was as they got gathered up that they could come in, but I just didn't feel like that was clear.
So it says
let me just read the version 7, which is the version that the council's had since the 20th of last month. Section 15 says simultaneous with developer or one of the developer affiliates first acquiring fee title to any portion of the ACC property, which is the Westbrook property, from the Westbrook Partners developer or the appropriate developer affiliate shall record in the official records on file in the office of the recorder a document substantially similar to that, which is attached as Exhibit J, the transfer declaration, signed by the developer, the city, and the Westbrook Partners. Because the city is the party to the Westbrook Development Agreement and the city's the party to this development agreement. Everybody, it says in there that those agreements can only be amended with the consent of the city. So the city will sign a document, and so will both parties when they're taking down property, and it will be recorded simultaneous. And once that happens, it says, once a transfer declaration has been recorded, the newly acquired property shall thereafter be considered after acquired property and shall be vested with all rights, entitlements, and obligations set forth in this agreement. That's the last sentence of 15.
Yeah, and it says, right, it says annexes and annexes said newly acquired property and make it subject to this agreement. So I think that clears up what I want. As long as Bruce is comfortable with that, I just wanted to make sure they were tied together.
Yeah. Yep.
So Bruce, I had that. And then when I went through, of course I closed it. And only because we're talking about this and we reference this table on, if you go council to the Firelight Developer Civic K table C1, this was a request that I had so that we didn't, in the document, we didn't tie the ERUs to commercial, and this comes right out of our code. And Planning Commission had just finished this up, and I brought this up to Joey before, but it says the last item, it says commercial and industrial, not including dwellings. And immediately I thought about a gas station, and it's for each 5,000 square feet of gross floor area, or for each part of 5,000 square foot interval, that we're only charging half an ERU, a residential ERU for that. So like a gas station could be easily under 5,000 square foot in the building side of it, and we're only going to charge half an ERU for that. So because it's going in the document, I feel like we've made a mistake and that we need to clean that up. My opinion, Planning Commission, I would ask for your guidance on that, but I don't think half an ERU for that type of use is enough.
And we can change that number if we can make an amendment. And I know that on the preliminary approval of the MPO, was subject to us completing this document to bring the ERU regulation to it. And I mean, the whole reason behind that, and I remember that conversation with the big store comes in, we wanted to bring the commercial in, so we didn't want to penalize them to have the commercial and have the revenue. So we set that at a small, we can sit down and do another amendment.
And I think that's just an oversight that we made, but now this is part of the document, so I think we need to have that cleared up. And at least agree to.
What do you think the conversion should
It
be?
should be subject to whatever, the approval should be subject to whatever the MPO is currently updated to.
Yeah, I think I don't have a problem changing this, and Heath, I don't know the right answer. You know, that's why we had Planning Commission work through this, but as I reviewed that, I thought a 5,000 square foot gas station is probably pretty common. Maybe not, maybe they're a little bigger, but you could definitely build it in 5,000 square feet of building, and then we're only charging a half an ERU for it. So it's like, I don't know if that's really the right.
What if there's a way to, like, if it's less than 20,000, it's one ERU, and once it breaks that number, then it's half ERU or something like that. If that makes, you know, that way.
And I think we could do something simple like that. Yep. And maybe that's what we do, is every
what would that do to
2,500 feet is a half, right?
What would that do to a hotel though, if you're starting?
It'll stop at some point.
It's different. Hotels.
Yeah.
Okay, that's right,
Yeah, if you look at it, it's spelled out.
When we talk about gross floor area, is that just so building area?
That's how I interpreted it. So, and I think it even,
I mean, there is that balance.
it does say gross floor area.
You want to encourage
Right. Yep.
commercial because that's where it benefits the
And
city.
Ty, you're mostly thinking about like water usage, sewer impact, and those types of things, probably like bathrooms.
All of those things matter, but initially in Westbrook's agreement, we charge 2 ERUs per commercial, right? That's how that agreement was written.
Per acre.
No, per 2 ERUs per commercial acre. Right, I would agree with that. So, and I want to promote commercial, but I just felt like this was low. When I looked at it, I was like, half is not enough.
Is there, you can't go less than one?
Well, you can. We've done it through the whole document.
Well, no, I mean on a commercial. If you got a commercial unit,
Well,
I just,
so Justin, it's right there. And so we did it, so residential's 1, and then it
Right.
talks about hotel motel at 0.25, apartments at 0.5, those items. And so I just felt like we needed to make a tweak for that. Joey, do you think that'll cover what we're trying? So, so if we said like, so you'd take a building, and if it's 5,000 square feet, you're gonna charge them 2 2,500 ERUs, which would be a half, right? So it'd be 1 full ERU. I'm fine with that. So Bruce, did you hear that conversation?
I heard enough to say that you felt like that the ERU count, if you will, for like a gas station might have been a mistake if it came through planning commission. It might be too low at a half ERU, and that needed to be fixed. And then as people more distant from the mic spoke, I couldn't hear what they were saying, but my guess is that was the gist of the conversation.
Yeah, I think the suggestion is, instead of it being 5,000 square feet of gross floor area, it's 2,500 square feet of gross floor area. That might get us closer to what.
I'm okay with
Was
it not being
originally
2 because I want to promote commercial. So I'm fine with that. I think if we're charging an ERU for that commercial, I'm fine with it. So,
Okay, anything else you have, Councilman Brinkley?
while we're on Exhibit K, where would the ERUs fall for a nightly rental complex?
Do you mean like,
Type of construction they do, if they do apartment condominium base, or if they do individual houses, it would be broken down to each one of those things. So it would have to be determined by the development of the construction.
So, okay. So it would fall into one of those, categories. Thank you.
Mayor, that covers what I had.
okay, so do we now, Councilman?
So, sorry, one other thing. So Joey, in our last meeting, when we talked about this, Planning Commission had some comments and conditions that they had applied. Did those get put into this agreement, to your knowledge? Or do we need to add those to the conditions that were, that we have listed?
So that the understanding of
Bruce.
No other conditions that the planning commission has to subject to are incorporated in this agreement or the conditions list?
I haven't reviewed that. I did send an email to Keith saying, asking whether those conditions were built into this agreement. I don't recall if Keith had a chance to respond to that yet, but I do want to make certain that whatever conditions the planning commission recommended, to the extent the council agrees with those conditions, that they are added to this list.
All right, Joey,
So-
do you need time to find that or do you?
No, I've got it. So the one of the motions, or the main motion I think you're talking about, is that all permitted and non-permitted uses follow that of the city. So I actually asked Bruce, I don't know, I didn't formally ask him, it was just a comment, but one of the things in 1015C-2, it's kind of the end of that, it says, however, uses including both permitted and conditional uses specified in each zoning district in this title shall not be modified by the application of the regulations in this article. So I don't know by that sentence, and Bruce, I think, actually pointed that sentence out, means that they can't modify them anyway, if that is interpreted right. So that was one of the motions made by Planning Commission is that was kind of that would follow that of the city. That was what we recommended. Yeah, but if the way that the MPDO regulation reads, and it might have to be mooted anyway.
Or would be conditional then, is that what you're saying, on the permitted uses, they would all be conditional?
They would just follow the city's processes. If it's a permitted use in that zone for,
If it's currently a permitted use, that's always a permitted use. It has to go through
conditional use, and
Scott, what page
the
is that on?
process, it has to go through the process.
In the development agreement, you know, that's out.
Permitted uses are in the application. Yeah, the MPDO, I think.
That's right.
And I've attached this to there. It is exhibit H to the development agreement.
Right, it's in the back end of the.
Very back, page 52. I don't read, when I read the MPDO ordinance, my understanding is that, and I guess the question I have with Jody is, that, or to Bruce is, are we only talking about the permitted uses within the R120 zone, which is the underlying zoning for this property? Because the way that the MPDO ordinance reads, it allows for a blend and configuration of various uses as allowed within the city. And so I'm sitting here trying to say, okay, so if this is a permitted use somewhere in the city, can you not identify it through a use table and say it can be used in this MPDO zone? And that's what we attempted to do by doing this.
And I think, well, I think that's why this table is pertinent, right? Like,
That's why I would agree. I don't know how we don't.
We also want to be stricter about certain things, so it isn't like carefully curated list of permitted uses. Only for commercial.
We, as the developer, don't want certain uses that might be permitted in some zones, we want them not permitted in certain residential and commercial planning areas within Firelight.
I think Bruce would have to be the final interpretation on how that reads, and then, because he was actually part of that motion that we made.
So let me just summarize. Bruce, are you there?
I am, and let me just apologize, this should be the last time I can't be there in person. I'm still trying to help my wife, and she's had this surgery, so I'm trying to stay closer to home, be the chief cook and bottle washer for a little bit.
No problem. So the question is, well, you've heard the discussion, right, on the permit?
I've gathered most of it, I think it's sort of intermittent, but I think I've gathered most of it on the use issue and the table and what the MPDO says with uses, and there's an introductory sentence or paragraph, the MPDO, that seems to make it say that the MPDO cannot vary the uses, I believe.
So is this one that we want to put on our conditions list and
Yes.
continue to go forward?
Yes,
All right.
that use issue must be a condition.
And is that on your list now, or is it not on the list yet?
I had a variant of that on my list that I was going to go through at the end, so I'll talk about that variant and this overall use issue when I go through my list. I got about 4, now maybe 5 conditions that.
All right, does anybody else have any conditions they want to cover before we have Bruce go through his? All right, Bruce, go ahead.
Okay, so into comments from Adam and which I forwarded on to you. There was a paragraph with the Sun Parkway, and Adam had indicated that should be stricken from the agreement because it dealt with some impact fee issues that didn't seem to be appropriate within this agreement. But when as it turns out, there's nothing in the agreement that speaks to the obligation of Firelight to construct the Parkway. that's in the Westwood agreement. And it's my understanding that Firelight has assumed that obligation and moving forward with that obligation to construct the Parkway. So I think that there should be, as a condition to this agreement, an exhibit added to the development agreement, which is a separate agreement between Firelight and the city for construction of the Parkway. So that there's no loose ends about Firelight being obligated to, and whether there's shortfalls or anything else that needs to be made up for, who's doing that, and that should be an agreement that is finalized, executed, and incorporated as an exhibit to the development agreement.
So is that, you're talking about roughly page 31, right?
I don't have it open in front of me right
Okay,
now, I can't open it, but that's,
no, it's okay. But on your list, Councilman Chase and I are looking at your list, and it says page 31, item 14C, I3.
yes, that's the list that came from me, and that is eliminate that section. But that section needs to be not just eliminated as in its current form, but we do have to have that separate agreement, yes. And so I think we're all on the same page, but I want that separate agreement executed.
Why wouldn't we just deal with it in the development agreement?
Agreement, so that we don't execute the development agreement and find that we can't get the terms on the separate agreement.
Okay, Heath asked a question. Heath, what was your question?
Bruce, my question is, if it needs to be dealt with, why don't we just deal with it in the development agreement? Why would we take it out of the body of the development agreement and attach it as an exhibit to the development agreement?
It might be longer than you might want for the body, and so whether it's in a separate agreement or addressed in the agreement, if it's a separate agreement and executed concurrently so that everyone knows it's all buttoned up, or whether it is included in and replaces what's currently there in the Tokerville Parkway section. I think we don't care.
Yeah.
As long as we have an agreement on the construction of the Tokerville Parkway.
Well, I guess,
Can I make a suggestion?
sure.
The Tokerville Parkway financial structure has already changed substantially. There's a lot of state money in it. There's probably going to be a lot more state money. I think most of us familiar with the old structure and the new structure know that it's not going to be Firelight paying for the whole thing. It's just the way it is. I think we could replace reference to the Tokerville Parkway with Firelight and the city of Tokerville agree to meet and come to an agreement in good faith.
I don't want the development agreement to say that Tokerville Firelight will reach an agreement. I want an agreement executed and if there's a separate agreement and attached. I don't want an agreement to agree that we never get to.
That will take months.
So Bruce, if there's already an obligation or an agreement in the prior development agreement with the prior landowner, right, with Westbrook's group, why doesn't that just carry over? I mean, in other words, like Scott was saying, that the structure's changed a bit, but the obligation is still there. That hasn't changed, right?
The party with the obligation right now is Westbrook. And so that, I think, has changed because I think that the obligation now for the Parkway, and someone can correct me if I'm wrong, but that obligation for the Parkway is on Firelight, whether or not Firelight buys all 1,700 acres from Westbrook. And so I think we need to have that made clear so that if Firelight doesn't buy all the property, they don't say we don't complete all of the road as an example.
So you're saying that you want
a provision or a separate agreement that says that Firelight will have the obligation to sign a blank check, because we don't know how much the cost overruns or anything like that will be on the Parkway.
That's what Bruce is saying. I think what he's saying is, because the prior development agreement was an obligation, it didn't run with the land, but rather was personal to Doug Westbrook's group. Now that we have a new development agreement, it should run with the land instead, and so whether the funds come from the state or they come from another source, but as long as the road is built and the responsibility to fund it is, and when I say responsibility to fund, I don't mean out of personal funds, but just to make sure that it gets funded one way or another, still rests with the developer. Is that what you're saying, Bruce?
Pretty close, and obviously the Westbrook group is not agreeing to this development agreement, and the Westbrook group's agreement terminates, if you will, for each addition, takedown by Firelight, and I just don't want to get in some untenable position where the party that's funding the road or responsible for organizing the funding for the road, that I don't have an agreement with that particular party. And at this point, I don't have an agreement with Firelight. When I say I, the city doesn't have an agreement with the party that is tasked with pulling together funding to that road. And once again, there's a shortage of state funding or whatever. Who's responsible for that? Is that the finger being pointed at Westbrook, or is the finger being pointed at Firelight? And I want that resolved. So that it's not a question at the end.
So hold on, just a minute. So Mr. Strick, did you want to say something at this point, or no?
I mean, Bruce, where does the $7 million that we've already paid for the road, where does that come in? You want to do a separate agreement for that $7 million, or do we get credit for that?
So,
So this stuff.
I thought it was 6.8, but it's nearing $7 million. I mean, it's a lot. And I felt like this is something we could address very quickly, because there's a couple other elements with the UDOT agreement that we needed to tweak as well. So I would suggest, let's just pull this out. Heath, I know it's against your counsel, but I think this is a simple thing.
I agree with taking it out, but Bruce is saying take it out only on the condition that we have another agreement in place as a condition to sign this document.
We're going to bid out that next phase. The next, say, 6 weeks, we're going to know whatever the shortfall is.
Yeah.
And then we can have that conversation.
On paper, what the shortfall is, it depends on what the cost comes in when it's actually constructed.
Yeah, absolutely. But I also feel like we've had a developer move forward with us to get a road built. They helped us secure 18 million. They put in $7 million to get a road started, and we're getting hung up on who's going to fund it. My whole point with this is I want to make sure, I don't want to go to Doug Westbrook and say, well, you're on. And that was my concern. And I needed to make sure we have an element of how we finish it up. And I think we can do that. Pull this out. Let's scratch that section. Let's get an agreement that we can agree to of how we're going to finish paying for it. Let's be done with it. I think we can do that very simply.
I agree that we need to deal with it in a separate agreement. We probably already need to deal with the first 7 million that's already been contributed and address that, because that was just kind of done in good faith. Here's the check, put it in the city's bank account. Yeah, and so that's what was.
To see the road built.
Yeah, I don't want it to be a holdup to the execution of this agreement. If you want it taken out, then let's take it out, but not have it subject to full, complete negotiation and sign off of a separate agreement, because we've already been dealing with in good faith as it is and brought UDOT funding.
Well, the city council can stop this development at every single phase. If we don't agree, every single phase we want to do it. If there's a short
expensive not to be all the time, but your concern, but it sure is mine. And yeah, we feel like the good faith that we put in. I'm not sure I would have done that. I know I would not do that again, ever, not with, no, I would not do that again.
All right, so Bruce, you following that?
I think that was first, if I'm not mistaken.
Yes.
Uh,
And he said everybody's been working in good faith and he expects everybody to continue working.
He has. I have the greatest of respect for Darcy and as an individual and his team collectively. And I think he has worked in good faith, and I think the city has. I'm just trying to address that condition that was added in there. I think by Scott McCall, by talking to people, and he has it in there. It says eliminate this section and then will be addressed by a separate agreement. And I'm trying to just to say that if we're going to have a separate agreement, I want to make certain that that separate agreement is finalized and signed on or before the date the development agreement is finalized and signed, so that I know we have an agreement. And because things are breaking up, I don't know if we got to the point where the council didn't feel like we needed a separate agreement.
No, I think what they're saying is as a gesture of good faith, we, the city council, would replace this section here with a simple statement of some sort that says the parties will continue to work in good faith for the funding and construction of the Tokerville Parkway to completion, and then move on and then leave it at that, not being an obligation to, not an agreement to agree down the road, because that holds up everything.
I agree. An agreement to agree, I don't like. A separate agreement, maybe we don't get to that. I'm okay with what you're suggesting, Mayor, but the one concern I have, at least I've heard discussion about it previously, and I would like to know how it's going to be solved. And that is, what if there's some shortfall on the funding that needs to be covered to complete the road? An agreement that says we're going to work in good faith to complete the road doesn't address that shortfall issue.
Well, Bruce,
Do anything until the road connects, right? Because that's bound them, so they can't move forward. They can't put a house up, they can't do anything. So they are bound to help finish that road.
yeah, I think we also need to remember in one of the earlier discussions we were talking.
I hear you. If the council is comfortable with that, I'll support them, but I do like to have something that is explicit, not just implicit, that if there's a shortfall, this is the party that's covering that shortfall.
All right.
No, I'm.
All right, let's go to your next item, Bruce.
Okay, the next item goes along with the use issue that we need to resolve. As an example, the nightly rental ordinance that has been discussed with, does it sort of control over the MPDO plan? Will nightly rentals be allowed in the MPDO area, notwithstanding the nightly rental ordinance that might suggest otherwise? And I still have to look at that and reconcile whether the nightly rental ordinance would control over that, and if so, whether there's going to be any desire to amend that ordinance. But I still have to resolve that. And then the next point was the planning commission recommendations. Joy read those, so I'm not going to talk about that. The last one is sort of a catch-all, and that is this, that if the council or myself as conflict counsel identify any other issue that's not on the list that we need to address to the council's satisfaction, that's also a condition. So So I know we've got a list, which is wonderful, grateful to that. But I don't want to, particularly given the lateness of this, receiving this latest iteration, and I want to see the council approve it without this catch-all saying that there's any other condition that I or the council felt it needs resolution that it will get resolved.
All right, so let me repeat back that I have 4 conditions that you're mentioning. Let me make sure I got them all covered here. We have the Tokerville Parkway issue, we have the 9-day rental issue, the planning commission recommendations, and then a catch-all. Any other items not addressed but later identified by either you or the city council?
Correct.
All right, are there any other conditions that the city council members want to see listed there as well? Staff, any other conditions you think should be included?
So I think the catch-all covers it. I think there's one other item in 10B, and it's just the wording, I think. It states, should the city request and developer consent in its sole discretion, developer may bear the initial cost of construction of public facilities known as system improvements, but shall be entitled to be reimbursed for those costs such as system improvements. I think the entitled side makes me a little nervous. I'd like to maybe look at that, but we have a reimbursement agreement already in place so that we can do a reimbursement agreement. I don't know if we needed to spell that out in there, but we have a mechanism already to do it.
Well, this came from Ash Creek. That's in the Ash Creek agreement, but realistically, understanding the difference between a project improvement and a system improvement.
Absolutely.
And if the city, while we're building a project improvement, for instance, a water line, the city says, you know what, we really want you guys to upsize that 6 inches bigger so that we can have additional capacity further down the line. We'd say, okay, we'll do that. We don't need it to service Firelight, but we'll do that so that we can service other areas of the city. But why would the developer have to pay for future development of somebody else? Okay, then.
We're putting all that roadway in.
Well, that's another point that I have with this whole thing.
Separate deal for, right? Is so when you guys identify you need an 8-inch and the city comes to you and says, you know what, we need to upsize that to a 10-inch, then the city's on the hook for the 8 to 10 difference, right?
Absolutely. So then what's the objection with the language?
Right?
Well, different. You mean, okay.
I just wonder if we ought to just change that back.
Follow the process. So should it just amend to say that it'll be, reimbursement will be dealt with per the city's policies? Because we had an ordinance, but I don't think we ever ended up finally adopting those reimbursement policies. It's not done yet.
Well, then
That's why, at least, since the city hasn't done that, that's why we're at least dealing.
We want to make that as one of the conditions as well. The reimbursements will be identified.
It's already in the agreement.
It says that we done case by case, but we just wanted to point out that the reimbursement agreement, the ordinance is not finalized.
So is this going to be,
That's fine.
Is this-
That's all we have.
We're done.
okay, all right, well then we've discussed. If any other question concerns from council members, and if not, then I'm looking for a motion.
I'd like to know what the decision is on this permitted use table, how we ended up that conversation.
Well, that,
Conditional. And, you know, as I go through that, there's a lot of those things that are more stringent than ours in a lot of areas. And I think at some point, I struggle with having to have every one of those things come back through the city. Most of those took place in the in your exhibit, you called out a commercial area, which was C3. Is that right? Did I have?
Yes, yes. Commercial planning area 3, which is the town center. Yeah.
But this was part of planning commission's conditions, right? This is one of these, so that's covered in our,
The only reason it came up with conditions is basically alcohol consumption.
Yeah, it wasn't, and when he read the condition, I was at the planning commission meeting, it was, the question was alcohol uses or alcohol establishments in whether it should be conditional in all of the commercial planning areas. And a comment was made, well, we should follow whatever the city says. And we went ahead and took it out of all places except for the town center, the commercial planning area 3, and commercial planning area 9. So,
Fine.
Well, the way it is right now, if we're going to use this permitted use table, then that's already built into the agreement.
yes, it is.
Anything conditional, if we all agree.
Well, but
Then that, I think, was the biggest hangup. I mean, I had some other personal.
And that's the
issues
stuff I had heard from the citizens as well, is when they went through and saw, well, alcohol's permitted in all these areas. And with that cleaned up, my concern with that table is very minute at this point.
So I think what Bruce decided is to decide on is what that language and that interpretation says. If it says one thing, then it has to follow the city. It may have been approved prematurely, but somebody like us missing it.
well, it's a recommendation, right, by planning commission, so the city council can make a decision that is
Yeah.
to adopt this table and have that supersede any of the.
But what the council has to recognize is we're not in agreement with the concept that it needs to follow the city's permitted and conditional uses, because there are several uses that we do not want in Firelight. And if you take away that table, how can we prohibit those? Okay.
So
Motion.
Can I make one comment?
Yes.
No.
I've heard two different people say that we're gonna have to look at changing the ordinance. This agreement clearly states the land use ordinances changed after this agreement is signed do not apply to this agreement. So don't think you're gonna amend the ordinance down the road to try and fix this.
where's that at?
It's in there. Okay, so as to uses and densities, it cannot be modified by future changes in the ordinance. But for instance, if the city wants to change its building permit requirements and stuff like that, whenever we go to apply for a building permit, we have to follow whatever the current ordinance is, those types of things. So that's not the point. It's anything that modifies uses and densities cannot be. Yeah, and so that statement is not completely accurate. I'm happy to read it to you.
Securing entitlements, but policies like building licensing, not still.
Right. Claxton, council members, do you want to read that? Are you comfortable with what it is? It's your decision.
He's got it. And maximum residential densities.
I don't think density is even a conversation, because we've already identified.
It has to do with
uses.
To be honest with you, densities aren't an issue.
Yeah, it's the use.
It's the other areas in the land use ordinances that are.
And I guess my concern with that is, I don't really have one, for the fact that we've got an MPDO, we have an agreement, we've identified these areas, what's permitted inside of them. I think where that could come into play is the city decides, well, we're not gonna have alcohol in the town, right? And we're done with that. And now we're going to retroactive to them, and now they can't have a town center that has alcohol in it, right? That would be a scenario that it would take place.
So Heath, does Heath have a copy in?
Absolutely. Mm-hmm.
So the reason we're not going to negotiate with them is because they've been pre-agreed upon?
Oh, no, I think what we intended to do, we had looked at the concept. Bruce is fairly busy, has other obligations that are more important. We knew that he wanted to hear the input, the concerns of the council, and he wanted the council's questions answered. So what we decided was to have Scott try to talk to as many of you as possible, answer your questions about the development agreement, and if there were any valid concerns or things, that he would put together a list that would change this, so that I wouldn't draft an 8th version of this, because it seems like there was confusion between the 6th and the 7th, and we didn't want to put an 8th. So we said, look, we're sticking with version 7 that was given to you on July 20th, subject to, and we gave you a modeled list of conditions or changes to version 7. That was prepared by Scott after talking to you and Ty. Yes. Yes. But Bruce has seen those.
Conditioned upon.
Yes, and we are fine with those.
Okay, so. Dropbox, I was like, you've got to be kidding me. I'm gonna go through this whole document again.
No, and
No, that's.
And I understand, I just didn't know if we saw this besides the council, and I wanted to make sure.
We prepared it, so we saw it. It was generated by us after feedback meeting.
Okay, so back to looking for motion. Are you listening to the council's advice on that? Mhm. Yeah, those are the exceptions we're talking about, right?
One with your agreement on Parkway?
Yep, that's one of the exceptions. So it would, it's up to the city council, but you could move to approve it, subject to these exceptions or conditions, and then those will be later resolved with, between parties, and then it would be brought back for adoption by the city council. Once it's approved by our conflict counsel, Bruce Jenkins, and then brought to us. Or, and then that's that list of them. What's that?
Well, I don't think that's true. I think if we approve it conditionally, it doesn't come back to us, right?
So what Bruce Jenkins had said earlier was that it would be subject to approval by conflict counsel and city council. Bruce, are you hearing that?
I am, yeah.
And so the question is, if we approve it subject to the conditions listed, do those conditions, once they're agreed upon by you, on the city's behalf, do they come back to the city council for approval, or do they not?
They will. I'm not going to have the city council sign a document until you've read it, because let's assume, as an example, that Heath and I worked on something, I wordsmithed it, I think I wordsmithed it in a way that meets the council's intent. I want the council to read that and say, yes, Bruce, good job, you captured our intent, rather than, hey, Bruce, you did not capture our intent. So you will see it again, and you will give a final blessing to.
But the only thing that would be brought forward at that time would be these exceptions, not the rest of the document is adopted if they adopt it tonight. That document is done except for the exceptions. Is that right?
Yes, and my catch-all exception sort of catches all in case we find something, but yes, that is a fair statement, that it would be approved in its conditions, subject to resolving these conditions, one of which is, if we find anything else, you guys or me, when I say guys, I don't mean to just say
It's okay.
man, but councilman. If we find something else, then we'll address it but the parties are committed to address those conditions, including some we might hear out of identify.
Now, I believe that we are approving the draft with the conditions listed tonight, and that the attorneys would be authorized to finish the document based on tonight's. That's going to affect the city council.
It's not really an approval.
Well,
Well, it can be. It all depends on how the motion's drafted. It can be.
We do this often where we have things that need to be modified and changed. We approve it, those changes are made. And then when they're approved, that's finalized, then it's signed and we're done.
Then my suggestion would be the motion would give Mr. Jenkins the authority and then someone else on the council. I can tell he doesn't want to make that call on his own. He wants someone else to review. So whether that is you, whether it's the mayor, or whether it's two other council members to review outside and just give approval. I think we can structure something like that.
Which I'm totally comfortable. I think we're there. I think we've addressed these issues. I think we're done with councils. We just need to plug them in.
So they're not ranging around, they're down.
Okay, I'm fine with this.
So someone make we need a motion.
So Bruce, if you'd give me a little guidance here, do I need to specifically go through and mention the conditions that are listed, or can I refer to the list?
Let me just say something. There's the conditions that are listed. There are those 4 I identified, and then Councilman Ringhurst identified, I think 3, and I don't want those to be left off.
What are Brainhurst's 3?
They're on that list. They're the last 3.
He wanted the subject property and acquired property issue clarified. And,
And I think it's
clarified.
That satisfied you, didn't it?
yeah, Bruce, I think to go down further, I think we've got that one crossed off.
And then there was as I understood it, the ERUs, the gas station, probably needs to be a tweak somewhere. The gas station example on the square footages from 5,000 down to 2,500 and how that gets handled, whether that has to go back to planning commission or what, but there's that one. And the last one I think was section 10B that we're talking about.
Which 10B was, I'm trying to think how you wordsmith that back to
The
what.
upsizing.
Yeah.
Whether that was adequate.
All right, commercial. I'm trying to think of how to put that together. So,
Was that worked out?
well, we have an agreement in place already, so we just need to. All right. I don't know who the magic person is that's typing in here. I love it.
It is me.
Oh.
Oh, I thought it was.
I'm like, stuff's getting out of here. It's what we're talking
Well,
about.
it's exactly, I'm trying to add that so you guys can read it, so it'll be the official document, the conditions.
Got it. I was just curious who was doing it.
Many a time I have proposed what a good motion should be, and it was so moved. All I'm trying to do is help you guys along with
Are you saying that you're adding that to this list and having us just print out a new one?
in
So-
real time.
So,
You guys can see my typing right now.
I'm not going down in the water while you're doing that.
Any issues or concerns identified by the city's council to be revised to the satisfaction.
so Bruce, I'm going to go ahead and make a motion, but I would appreciate you if you can listen with both ears for a minute. Make sure I don't butcher this thing and cover what needs to be covered. So Mayor, I'd make a motion to approve the development agreement. I need to include and conditioned upon the list of conditions, and I'm going to go through those. It was page 8, the ERU, remove the reference to commercial structures, which we've covered. Page 18, 8B, commercial planning areas, there shall be no those were covered. Page 19 is covered. Page 20, page 22, page 23, page 30, either page 31, 34, and 34 again. All of these items were listed. They were part of the concerns that I had. The new concerns and conditions would be that we would modify the ERU table, that it would change from a half ERU. Let's see, I got to get it right. That the ERU would stay at a half it would go from 5,000 square foot to 25,000 square foot on the commercial floor.
2,500.
2,500, yeah, thanks. In the commercial floor space. Let's see, planning commission recommending conditions to be adopted, except the portion about eliminating the permitted and conditional use table. So we have the conditional use table, which I'm moving that I'm fine with.
Permitted use.
That the table is correct and permitted.
This table, that's exhibit H, right? Yeah, okay.
Yep. And then that the nightly rental issue be addressed to satisfy the city's conflict council, which, this is a motion. Anyways, and then any issue or concerns identified by the city's conflict council or city council to be resolved. And then the final item was on page 29, parties will work together to procure ownership and easement for water tank sites, distribution facilities. Costs will be borne by the developer, which we're already in process of. And then Heath, there was some items that were discussion items that were at the bottom.
The other one's the 50-foot height.
Yep, which we've addressed. But they're not, oh, did I skip over them or are they right? Am I missing it?
It's a discussion.
If they were to be discussed now that we've discussed them and dealt with them. Tokerville Parkway.
And then, thank you. And then the final item was to change, I think Keith or Bruce, the idea would be to change the verbiage identifying the Parkway to allow the city and the developer to work together to finalize the funding for the remaining portions of the Parkway.
Can I suggest one thing to that motion?
Absolutely.
Yeah, it's either that the council appoints someone to work with me and approve these changes, or that I bring all these changes back for full council review and approval. I need to know which way I'm dealing with this.
Point, Ty and Gary.
I would be fine taking the assignment, Mayor. The bulk of these items were items that I had sorted through already. And I think Gary had a fair amount and we covered a lot of them together. So Bruce, if you're comfortable with that, I would move that Councilman Bringhurst and Councilman Chaves would approve the final draft of this to be executed by the mayor.
And I'm fine with that if the council approves that authority to do that.
I'll second that motion.
All right, we have a motion and we have a second. Any other? No, I'm not going to open it up. All in favor, say aye. Aye. Any opposed? All right, motion carries unanimously. Thank you all. Okay, let's go to, we do have some council reports. Councilman Bringhurst has an item he wants to discuss with us briefly.
So I'm going to keep it.
Everyone, is it okay if I drop off?
Yes, thank you, Bruce. We appreciate your time.
Thank you, and my life, but appreciate working with all you guys and look forward to wrapping this document. Thanks.
So, Mayor, you all right?
Yes, go ahead.
In my reports, I sit on the TSWS board with the mayor, with Dave Jessup, Zach Renstrom, and Joey Campbell this time.
Just for clarity, that's the Tokerville Secondary Water System.
Yes. We have a contract agreement with the water district at this point, and that agreement expires in 2028. The district has no intention of renewing that agreement, and that agreement basically states that they run and operate our secondary system. We have been in conversation with them to acquire that system to bring it into the city. So I have a couple items that I need to work through and get guidance from the council on. One of the major item is we would like to close that out in by calendar year 2024. We'd like to have that done early. It's why the TSWS has been raising the rates, trying to get it up so it's self-funded. Two, do we want to operate it with inside the city as a city-owned utility? Or do we want to keep the TSWS board in place, change the bylaws so that it's appointed by the council, so that entity continues to function and work with inside the city? So those are probably the high-level questions that I need to start working through with the council to know where we're going to go. And then I need to request some funds as well.
And the funds are going to be used for
So
what?
I need to, we need to move forward. The water district has agreed that they'll half the cost with us to move forward with getting an assessment done of the value of the system, help us identify a rate structure so that it will fund itself into the future, and the needs that it will have.
Will the district allow us to acquire our interest or acquire the system over time?
So I've got a list of things that was diving deeper. So those aren't, that wasn't what I was gonna go into yet.
Yeah, I think we hold off on the high, on those, let's stay with the high level, which is
Figure out
how do we want to do it? Yeah.
Allison wants to know how we're gonna pay for it.
Well, that's my next question. So we have funds within the budget now for this study. That's the real question.
I'll be looking for, if we, Afton, if I could, and we probably can't do this,
Yeah,
in Daisy would need to put it. So,
We'll put it on the agenda.
so I need it on the agenda with an expenditure of no more up to $10,000. That'll give me time to get an estimate from Alpha so that we
And
can.
I will tell you, so a couple of things about that. For one, we've established an engineering pool so that we've established an engineering pool, we don't have to bid it out. Not only that, $10,000 from the mayor's procurement budget, so if we sit down and identify a funding source for that, then we can actually.
Okay, so may I
That's
ask you-
under your procurement. It doesn't need to come to council. That's under your procurement.
What about those ARPA funds?
That's water.
That can be used on water.
It's water.
Yeah, the council tells us.
So Mayor, if you could give me,
It's under his procurement.
if you could work with
Yeah.
staff and then give me direction on that, I'd like to move
We have
forward with that.
options.
So do we need this, so are we talking about keeping this maybe a special district on its own or putting under the
That's-
city?
something to think
That's
about.
a high level
Right.
question that I need council to work through. There's pros and cons of both sides of
I'll
that.
give you just a little bit of input.
Absolutely.
I would like, it would be my advice to you to consider bringing it under the umbrella and making it a department of the city, as opposed to having a separate entity, even if we are able to basically put the majority of the individuals on the administrative control board of it.
So you're saying just have a department, like we have a culinary department and we have a secondary department?
The reason being is that sometimes you don't want to have a two-headed dragon that can have the effect of having some control on land use and development. And I know there are plenty of municipalities in northern Utah where there's a lot of special service districts that, in all thoughtfulness, they created, like 2 municipalities created a sewer district. And then all of a sudden it's like, now there's a third or a second or third layer of approval that has to be dealt with. Where if you bring it in under the umbrella and make it a department of
City, then it's just managed by the city council.
managed by the city
So-
council, city manager, and the department head.
So I like a lot of that, and this is a discussion. The part I don't like about that is we go into the future and we become a more densely populated area. Who's going to defend our agricultural users, right? So that's one of the benefits of the board is you can appoint people to sit on that board. So you can represent ag, you can represent the residential downtown, you can spread it out, which is the way it's structured now. And again, I'm not convinced either way. I'm just saying, like, you gotta weigh out where we want to go with it. And those are items that have to come to the council, and the council has to move forward with, make a motion on. So I just wanted that to be aware. It's something I've been working on with the district for a while now, but we are getting to the point where we actually need to get some real motion moving forward and get in the mud of how we're going to execute and what that's going to look like.
So you're saying at some point in time, the city could have a whole, basically, Firelight citizens sitting on this?
I did not say that.
Yeah, well, I'm just saying that, and they have an interest in tapping into some PSWS water.
That's a good point.
But the same thing could happen though if you have a separate board. It could be, handled by other people that are supposed to be protecting the ag people that don't.
That's the city council too,
And that's one of the beauties of the board. We could structure it in a manner in which there was 2 members of the board that sat on, or 2 members of the council that sat on it. There probably wouldn't be any harm in keeping a member of the water district on and then appointing 2 other people at random from within town. Now, I'm not saying that's the structure, but there's some wisdom in putting some thought process into what that looks like and what we value. And I think we can work through that.
If you do that, we need to make sure that we restructure the bylaws sufficiently that this body appoints everybody to that board.
And this is
So if
just,
they start to go rogue,
and this is just the beginning of conversations. We're going to have a lot of conversations about this, and there's going to be a lot of questions that need to be worked through. One of the things I talked to the mayor about this is our staff, Darren, has a fair amount of knowledge in our system. And I'm going to, hopefully with permission from the council, draft Darren to be in the middle of all of this to help me work through and try to close up the holes that we're missing. But I just wanted, though that's going on in the background, those are some items we need to talk about and just realize that we're trying to get something in place by 2024.
Let me be selfish for the city.
Absolutely.
Okay. Right now, the water district is basically subsidizing.
The county is subsidizing us, yes.
So therefore, by us accelerating this, we have to accelerate the water rate increases. And what would be the incentive for us to do that if we stayed till 2028 and let the subsidy continue helping to carry us while we do incremental smaller rates?
So there's a lot to go with that. The basis of it is, I will not be in office after 2024, and we want to get it negotiated and worked out before I'm gone. That's what it is. We've already started talking about how do we implement that. The district's thrown out ideas such as, well, we just won't charge for water. We'll give you a period of grace so that you can build up coffers, have a replacement fund, so that you can start to operate it in a positive, in the black, instead of playing catch up the whole time. Those are all going to be things that we need to brainstorm around and work through so that we can, go from city council to the board and get these things hashed out. There's going to be a ton.
You're trying to say that you're going to get it negotiated before you decide to leave, and then have no additional cost to the city as a result of doing, whether we did it earlier or did it later.
Yes.
And I will say, having had some conversations with the district about it, they want it sooner than later.
Oh, I know that.
Yeah, and not because of the costs,
Right.
but they'll do what we're doing, asking them to do, but because it's outside of the parameters really what they're modeling. They're wholesalers, not retailers.
Let's put this on the agenda for
Becomes
now.
a retailer. All right, so any other reports?
I believe that you asked for this to be on the agenda as a discussion topic and it was not put on. So
I
I tried
did.
to do it the other way. I
sent
need that report
message,
to
yeah.
TSWS so that we could move forward. So
Okay, any other reports from the city council members?
that's all I have, Mayor.
Anyone else? All right, we do have just a couple items. Remember the farmer's market. I think Afton mentioned this already for August 20th. And then we have the Sod Lane Party for Westfield Park. We're going to come up with that date and time before too long. One hand in the back, disappeared.
Can you put on the agenda the resolution of the right-of-way, restricted easement, whatever it is, for you guys first?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, we'll talk about that afterwards. Yeah, but that's something we need to address right away. You're right. Thank you. Okay, if that's it, we are adjourned. Thank you for coming. And it is 8:16 PM.